Right now, you're wearing clothes. You probably haven't thought about it once today. You got dressed on autopilot the same way you've done almost every morning of your life, but you are the only animal on Earth that does this. No other creature on the planet covers its body, decorates it, and feels something close to shame when it doesn't. Every other species walks around exactly as it was born. So somewhere in our deep past, a naked hairless ape made a choice that no animal had ever made before. It picked something up off the ground and put it on its body. The reason it did changes everything about how we became human. And the truth is stranger than just being cold. Let's start with a problem most people never think about. To wear clothes, you first have to be naked. And humans are bizarrely, almost uniquely naked. Look at our closest relatives. Chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, all covered head to toe in thick hair. We are the odd ones out, the only primate that traded a full coat of fur for bare skin. So before we can ask why we put clothes on, we have to ask a weirder question. Why did we take our fur off in the first place? The answer goes back about 1 million years, to the savannas of Africa. Research into human genetics, specifically the genes that control skin color, points to humans losing most of their body hair somewhere around that time. And the leading theory is heat. Our ancestors had become endurance hunters, animals that chased prey across open ground under a brutal sun for hours. Fur traps heat, bare skin covered in sweat glands releases it. So we evolved to be the sweatiest, most naked ape on the planet, because it let us run down animals that could outsprint us but couldn't outlast us. We literally shed our fur to become better hunters. But here's where the timeline gets strange. We lost our fur around 1 million years ago. We didn't start wearing clothes until far, far later. Which means for hundreds of thousands of years, human beings walked the earth completely naked and completely hairless. No fur, no clothing, nothing. So, what finally made us cover up? And how could scientists possibly know the date when clothing rots away to nothing and leaves no fossils? The answer came from one of the most unexpected places imaginable: lice. In 2011, a team led by David Reed at the University of Florida published a study in the journal Molecular Biology and Evolution, and their method was genuinely brilliant. Humans have two kinds of lice: head lice, which live in your hair, and body lice, which live in something head lice can't survive on: clothing. Body lice are so specialized for living in fabric that they simply could not have existed before clothing existed. They had nothing to cling to. So Reed's team sequenced the DNA of both kinds and worked backward to find the exact moment the two species split apart. That split, the birth of the clothing louse, is the fingerprint of the birth of clothing itself. And the date they landed on was roughly 170,000 years ago. Now line that date up against the climate, and the picture snaps into focus. 170,000 years ago, the Earth was deep in one of its ice ages. The world was colder, harsher, less forgiving. A naked, hairless ape that had spent 1 million years optimizing to dump heat was now stuck in a freezing world with no way to keep it in. Clothing wasn't a fashion statement, it was survival equipment. We had stripped off our fur to hunt in the heat, and now we had to build a removable fur from animal skins just to stop ourselves from freezing to death. And that one invention did something nobody could have predicted. It let us leave. For its entire existence, our species had been trapped in Africa, held inside the warm band of the planet our naked bodies could tolerate. But the lice data shows we started wearing clothes around 70,000 years before we began spreading into the cold north of Europe and Asia. Clothing was the key that unlocked the rest of the world. With animal hides on our backs, we could suddenly survive winters that would have killed our ancestors in a single night. A naked ape became a global species, not because our bodies changed, but because we learned to wear something that wasn't ours. Clothing didn't just keep us warm, it let us conquer the planet. But here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. If clothing was only ever about warmth, the story would end there. It doesn't, because when archaeologists dig up the oldest physical traces of human textiles, they find something that has nothing to do with survival at all. Go to Dzudzuana Cave in the country of Georgia. In layers of soil dating back more than 30,000 years, researchers led by Eliso Kvavadze found hundreds of fibers of wild flax spun into thread by human hands. That alone is remarkable. But it's what was done to those fibers that stops you cold. Many of them had been dyed: turquoise, black, pink. These Ice Age humans, scratching out survival in a frozen world, were taking the time to color their threads. You do not need pink thread to survive a winter. Dye does nothing to keep you warm. The moment we see the earliest evidence of fabric, we also see decoration, which means clothing was never only armor against the cold. Almost from the very beginning, it was also a message. And that changes what clothing actually is. Think about the bone needles archaeologists have found, some over 40,000 years old, delicate tools with tiny eyes drilled through them for thread. A needle like that lets you make fitted, tailored clothing. not just a hide thrown over your shoulders. It's an enormous amount of effort. And we poured that effort not just into staying warm, but into how we looked while doing it. The color of your clothes, the cut, the decoration, all of it became a way of saying something without speaking. Who you were, what group you belonged to, your status, your skill. Clothing became the first thing a stranger could read about you from across a valley before you ever said a word. So look at what we'd actually built. We shed our fur to hunt in the heat. We invented clothing to survive the cold. And then, almost immediately, we turned that survival tool into a language, a way to signal identity and rank to everyone who saw us. That last step is the one that never switched off. It's still running right now, today, in you. The brand on your shirt, the suit you wear to an interview, the outfit you'd never leave the house in. None of it is about temperature. It's the same ancient instinct that dyed flax pink in a freezing cave. The deep human need to tell the world who we are using the surface of our own bodies. And this is why being caught naked feels like one of the most universal human nightmares there is. Somewhere across those 170,000 years, clothing stopped being something we put on and became part of who we are. We don't just wear it for warmth anymore. We wear it because a bare body now feels like a sentence with no words, a person with no story. Every other animal on Earth wears nothing and feels nothing about it. We are the one species that looked down at our own naked skin and decided it wasn't enough. The next time you get dressed without thinking, remember, you're not just covering up. You're doing the single strangest, most human thing there is. You're telling the world a story, and you've been doing it for 170,000 years.